Toshiro Hitsugaya. Toshiro Hitsugaya, Hitsugaya Toshiro, is the captain of the 10th Division in the Godai 13. His lieutenant is Ranjaku Matsumoto. He formerly served as the 3rd seat of the 10th Division under Isshin Shiba. Hitsugaya comes from the province of Junranin in the 1st district of West Rukongai. There, he lived with his grandmother and Momo Hinamori. As a young child, Hitsugaya was a bit of a brat who liked to eat watermelons and poke fun at Hinamori. She called him Shiro-chan, and he retorted by calling her bedwetter Momo. The two were close friends, and Hitsugaya, despite being younger and much shorter than his friend, always felt that he needs to protect her. Even at a young, untrained age, Hitsugaya could hear the calling of his Zanpakuto spirit, Hirinmaru. Despite this, he never told anyone and couldn't accurately determine what was happening other than to assume it was an ever-recurring dream. When Hinamori left to become a Shinigami, he portrayed himself as happy to see her go, though it was more of an act than his true feelings. Her next-door friends were scared of him, even though he had never done anything to them. His grandmother, Granny, and Hinamori were the only ones in the district that weren't afraid of him. His personality was supposedly cold as ice, or at least thought to be, and he often wondered if it was due to his appearance or attitude. When Momo had been in the Shinigami Academy for 5 years, he began to notice how he hadn't grown an inch. He noticed that Hinamori's hair grew longer and she visited less often, seemingly having a goal in her life now. He also noticed that Granny was getting skinnier. While out at the market one day, a shopkeeper, whom he was buying items from, was treating him disdainfully. He then meets Ranjaku Matsumoto, who yells at the shopkeeper for being rude to Hitsugaya and reproached him for his poor customer skills. When Hitsugaya turns around, he is knocked down by bumping into Ranjaku's bosom. She then yells at him for lying there and crying about it and not standing up like a man, although it was she who had knocked him down in the first place. He then shakes her off and runs away. Later that night, he has a vivid dream of a gigantic, icy blue, serpentine dragon with large wings and an echoing voice. This dream is markedly different from the previous ones, where he had only experienced sensations, but nothing substantial to what the meaning might be. This time, however, the reason behind the dreams not only materializes, but tries to tell him its name. Hitsugaya cannot hear him, however, as his voice is muffled by strong winds. He then wakes up in a cold sweat. Upon waking up, he sees Ranjaku and is surprised to see her in his home. She immediately tells him to stop leaking his ryatsu everywhere and to get some sleep. She further explains that his grandmother looks pretty cold, which causes Hitsugaya to notice for the first time that the room is exceedingly cold and affecting his grandmother. Ranjaku then tells him he should become a Shinigami, stating that kids with power as strong as his need to learn how to bring their power under control. She explains that if he stays the way he is, his power will end up killing his grandmother. At first, Hitsugaya isn't sure what she is talking about, but she calmly places her hand on his chest and asks him if he hears a voice calling out to him. She explains to him that once he has found that voice, he'll understand how to control his power. She then notes that for that to happen he must become a Shinigami. Soon after, he tells his grandmother of his intentions of becoming a Shinigami. Much to Hitsugaya's surprise, she is happy for him. She tells him that she had always felt that he holds everything in because he didn't want to leave her, but doing so was only hurting him, and in turn, seeing him that way, hurt her. Hitsugaya then leaves to follow his own path with his grandmother's blessing. With Hitsugaya's natural talent, he quickly entered the Shinigami Academy and graduated early despite his age. Hinamori continued to call him Shiro-chan out of habit and felt she needed to protect him. Because of a promise she had made, she only began to call him Hitsugaya-kun after he had achieved his Zanpakuto-s Shirkai and was recognized as a Shinigami. Hitsugaya eventually joined the 10th Division under Isshin Shiba, working his way up to the rank of 3rd seat. One day, Hitsugaya reported to Isshin that a Shinigami in Naruki City died 2 months ago. Isshin was aware of the situation, having knowledge that the Godai 13 was investigating the incident. Hitsugaya then informed him that 2 more individuals died in the past month, while investigating the cause. Concerned, Isshin decided to investigate the cause himself. Ranjaku tried to go to assist him, but Hitsugaya stopped her, informing her that they were not strong enough to assist him. Afterwards he was also present to witness Ranjaku's rage towards their captain for returning to the living world, seemingly on a whim. Highly capable and knowledgeable, he quickly became the youngest of the captains within the Godai 13 in the entire history of Seoul society. He is also a friend of Jidanbo Ikanzaka, the West Gate keeper, who taught him the city rules. Appearance. Toshiro is short, with turquoise eyes and short, spiked, white hair, which tends to draw attention in the human world. He wears a standard sleeveless captain's haori with a green sash around his shoulders, held together by a round, star-like clip. The sash holds his Zanpakuto-S sheath in place on his back and is tied to it at either end. He sometimes walks around in his tabi. He is relatively young by Shinigami standards, and has the appearance of a child. In the human world, he wears a black, short-sleeved, golf shirt and gray pants. He also wore the uniform of Karakura High School. Before Toshiro was a captain, his hair was not as spiky, with only a few spikes here and there. He also wore the standard Shinigami outfit, but with the addition of the 10th Division's insignia on the left breast of his outfit. 17 months following Aizen's defeat, shortly after Ichigo regains his Shinigami powers, Toshiro appears sporting a hairstyle similar to that before he became a Shinigami, and a long turquoise scarf. His green sash has also changed to a thin chain, but still retains the star-like clip. After training for an unspecified amount of time in preparation to fight the Wandenrake, Toshiro's hair appears to have grown longer, his fringe now reaching down to his eyes despite being held up by a newly acquired bandana. He also appears lankier than before, with his robes loosely hanging off of his body. After being zombified by Giselle Gawel, Hitsugaya's appearance changes dramatically. He now wears a white double-breasted trench coat with black lapels that is fastened by 4 buttons on either side and which has a badge with a 6-pointed cross on its left breast. He has a black belt with a large buckle around his waist, slightly baggy white pants, and white boots with furry black liners. He retains the thin chain holding his Zanpakuto-S sheath around his upper torso. Personality. Hitsugaya is generally mature and serious, in contrast to his free-spirited lieutenant, Ranjaku Matsumoto. Despite their personality differences, he and Ranjaku seem very close as she is willing to follow Hitsugaya's orders through and through for important assignments out on the field. Hitsugaya is also easily annoyed by others goofing off or drawing unneeded attention to themselves, such as when he leads a team of Shinigami into Ichigo Kurosaki's school. He mainly dislikes anything that he deems childish as well as being described as something close to a child, such as being deemed as akin to an elementary school child. Other things he's not fond of are summer and warm weather in general. Toshiro's favorite foods are watermelon and aminato, though he does not like dried persimmons. During his childhood in West Rukongai, he was so skilled with spinning tops that he became the local undefeated champion. He often works very hard, but his motive seems to be that if he finishes quickly, he can return to his afternoon nap as he believes in the saying, "Children who sleep well, grow well." With this in mind, he hopes to grow quickly, and the saying is also a wish shared by his subordinates. Naturally, however, they do not voice this fact in front of him, for even regularly practicing this adage for so long, he did not really grow in height. Hitsugaya is usually joked about by many of the other Shinigami in Soul Society as well as by his enemies, though he tolerates these jokes and goes on with his duties, having often developed a cold attitude toward most people. Although he becomes angry toward such jokes at times, he doesn't take action against whomever insulted him unless they are his enemies. The only thing he cannot tolerate is not being addressed as Captain Hitsugaya, or an inappropriate use of his name, as he worked very hard for the title. However, likely as a sign of lingering immaturity, he does not return favor via not addressing any other captain with their title, and only by their last names. The only person that actually calls him by his given name is Ichigo, who he constantly reminds to address him properly, and Hinamori, whom he is overly protective of as both were old childhood friends, who is the only person allowed to get away usually with not addressing him properly. In that regard, Hinamori tends to call him Hitsugaya-kun, and both she and Yukitake occasionally use Shiro-chan, a nickname meaning Whitey, in reference to his hair, in both cases without any full repercussion other than Hitsugaya only being slightly miffed at Hinamori specifically, unlike with how she used such a name for him in their past together, and or Hitsugaya often focusing on another topic. In addition, Karen and her friends call him by his first name and are never given any serious rebukes for it. To his chagrin, Hitsugaya has often received candy and other foods from Jushiro Yukitake because their given names having the same suffix of Shiro, as Jushiro, and Toshiro, sound similar, and because they both have white hair, making them both Shiro-chan, in that sense. During his duel with Jin Ikamaru, Ikamaru remarks that Hitsugaya is the embodiment of a heavenly guardian that would be reincarnated every few centuries. Powers and abilities. Child prodigy. Perhaps the most astonishing trait of Hitsugaya is his intellect and natural talent. He is the most gifted prodigy the Soul Society has had since Jin Ikamaru, entering the Shinigami Academy on his first try despite his young age, graduating from the academy in a single year with the highest written and performance scores in each of his classes, joining the Godai 13 shortly afterwards, and then becoming the youngest Shinigami to ever reach the rank of captain. He has been called many things due to this. Renji and IBA have called him a child genius, and Ikamaru has called him the embodiment of the heavenly white angel that blesses Soul Society once a century. In terms of intellect, Hitsugaya is equally impressive. He was the first to suspect Ikamaru of treason, and saw that there was more to Rukia's execution than what was being said. Shunsui, one of the strongest Shinigami in history, states that because he is a genius, within 100 years, Hitsugaya could surpass him. Expert strategist and tactician, despite his age, Hitsugaya has great instinct and intuition in battle. He is generally aware of everything in his presence, and is also able to see through most deceptions. For example, he discerned that Jin Ikamaru was more than he seemed, although he was not yet sharp enough to realize it was all part of Aizen's plot. He is also a keen analyst, able to deduce the basic mechanics behind an opponent's attacks, and quickly figuring out its strength and weakness to better counter it. As a captain, he is a capable leader. He is given missions from Captain Commander Yamamoto to lead teams into the human world many times to deal with threats. For example, Hitsugaya led the team sent by Soul Society that reinforced Ichigo's group against the Arrancar. In battle, he has great instincts against incoming danger, such as from his reaction to Haribel's initial attack after releasing. After losing his Bankai to the Stern Ritter, Hitsugaya was forced to come up with several creative and unorthodox methods of using his limited Shirkai capabilities, such as combining his Zanpakuto powers with Matsumoto's Heiniko to create vacuum ice blades, creating a wall made of thin, interwoven ice threads and even generating a field of icy mist. Master Swordsman, Hitsugaya is masterful at swordsmanship, capable of utilizing his size to effectively counter and outmaneuver his opponents. His skill in swordsmanship is evident in the fact that he is the youngest Shinigami captain. He is therefore one of the youngest Shinigami to achieve Bankai. His skill in swordsmanship is great enough that he rarely uses even his Shirkai in battle, at which he has great proficiency with. Instead, he relies on Hyarinmaru's sealed form, only using its Shirkai or Bankai when things get tough. Shuinpa expert, Hitsugaya is highly proficient in Shuinpa. Repeatedly in battle, he is able to block and dodge dangerous attacks. Hakuda combatant, though usually relying upon his Zanpakuto in combat, Hitsugaya was able to knock out a grief-fueled Hinamori with a single blow, while in midair. Immense spiritual power. Toshiro's spiritual power has the same effect as his Zanpakuto, as it is an elemental representative of ice. His spiritual pressure is said to be very large and cold. Even before he became a Shinigami, his spiritual pressure was immense and uncontrollable, like Ichigo's, and caused people around him to freeze, namely his grandmother, who lived with him at the time. This cold spiritual power of his reflects his attitude as well. He is also the youngest Shinigami to ever achieve their Bankai. He even had visions of Hyarinmaru's spirit before he attained it or entered the Shinigami Academy. He is able to hide his presence well. On several occasions he manages to surprise Hinamori and Matsumoto with his sudden appearances, which leads them to complain about him sneaking up on them. His Ryatsu is white. Enhanced endurance. Despite his young and lean appearance, Toshiro is a resilient fighter. He survived the attacks of Shalong Kofang while at 20% of his actual strength. He also remained able to fight after taking a direct, piercing attack from Bazbi. Zanpakuto. Hyarinmaru redirects here. For the manifested spirit, see Hyarinmaru, Zanpakuto spirit. Hyarinmaru, Ice Ring. When sealed, Hyarinmaru looks like a normal katana with the exception of the guard, which is in the shape of a four-pointed bronze-colored star. Its hilt is light blue, and sheath dark blue. The sheath completely dissolves when he draws his sword. The sword is somewhat longer than most Zanpakuto, at about 1.4 meters long. This makes it taller than Hitsugaya, preventing him from wearing it at the hip. Because of this, Hitsugaya instead carries it on his back by his green sash over his right shoulder. Hyarinmaru is the strongest of all ice element Zanpakuto in Soul Society. As such, Hitsugaya doesn't need water to be present in order for him to use its abilities. Hitsugaya's control over Hyarinmaru's power is great enough to use some of its Bankai techniques while in Shirkai, though it can backfire and affect him as well. The difference in ability between Hyarinmaru's Shirkai and Bankai is very small. The true difference lies in the quantities of ice each form can create, with the Shirkai only being able to create comparatively small quantities. Shirkai, Hyarinmaru's release command is, sit upon the frozen heavens, Soden and I Zace, viz., reign over the frosted heavens. In its Shirkai, Hyarinmaru extends slightly in length, and gains a crescent-shaped blade attached to its hilt by a long metal chain, which can extend greatly, if necessary, by force of will. The chain itself can be used for attack, or to entangle a target. Shirkai special ability, Hyarinmaru allows Hitsugaya to control water and ice. His slashes create an immense amount of spiritual power which overflows from the tip of the blade, creating a flow of ice shaped like a Chinese dragon. The dragon flies towards opponents and instantly freezes anything it touches. Hyarinmaru can create multiple ice dragons to attack an opponent from various angles. The chain blade also freezes anything Hitsugaya traps with it. The power it expels is so overwhelming that in Soul Society, where Hitsugaya is not placed under a limiter, its mere release affects the weather within the immediate vicinity, creating a thunderstorm or blizzard. Tenso Jurin, subjugation of the heavens, one of Hyarinmaru's basic powers, as well as its strongest. It allows him to control the weather in the immediate vicinity, or more specifically, the water in the surrounding atmosphere. The ability is usable in both Shirkai and Bankai. However, Hitsugaya states that this aspect of his powers is not fully mature, and that he doesn't like to use it in Bankai mode, as he is unsure of whether or not he could keep it from killing everyone in the vicinity. Shinku Taso Hyohiki, multilayer vacuum ice wall to fight effectively despite the small quantities of ice his Hyarinmaru can create. Hitsugaya has developed this method of ice creation in conjunction with Ranjiku's Zanpakuto, Heiniko. By using the ashes of Ranjiku's Shirkai to create layers of ice, and then by removing the ashes and having Heiniko return to its sword form, Hitsugaya can create a multi-layer ice wall with several empty layers. This enables the little ice Hyarinmaru can create to be able to withstand fire attacks with little damage. Hitsugaya can then manipulate this ice to use as a sword. Shinku no Kori no Yaiba, vacuum ice blade. This ability allows Hitsugaya to control his Shinku Taso Hyohiki technique and manipulate the ice by gathering it at the tip of Hyarinmaru before expelling it forward, creating a large blade of ice which impales his opponent. Ryujin Hyohiki, woven ice wall. Hitsugaya generates a protective wall of ice by finely weaving threads of ice together. Roki Hyoketsujin, 6-clothed ice binding array. Hitsugaya can lay down a trap by placing 5 snowflake-shaped ice crystals on the ground in a pentagonal formation. When an opponent steps into the trap, each snowflake sends a line of ice towards them. The space within the pentagon is then encased in a large pillar of ice, trapping the opponent. Bankai, Daiguren Hyarinmaru, Mahapadma Ice Ring, viz. Grand Crimson Lotus Ice Ring. Hitsugaya's Bankai causes ice to flow from Hyarinmaru onto Hitsugaya, starting at his right arm, which ice forms onto in the shape of a dragon's head around his sword hand, encasing the sword up to the hilt, which also changes from the shape of a 4-pointed star to that of an 8-pointed star. The ice continues forming up over his shoulders, with 2 large wings sprouting from his back and a long tail. The ice forms down his left arm and encases his hand, which ends in a claw. Hitsugaya's feet are encased in ice in a similar manner to his left hand, as they also end in claws. These new ice limbs are movable, and can be used as an extension of himself to aid in battle. During some appearances of his Bankai, 3 flowers of ice form floating behind him, each consisting of 4 purple petals shaped like diamonds. These flowers melt away, petal by petal, as Hitsugaya's battle progresses, leading Xiaolong Kofang to speculate that Hitsugaya's Bankai will deactivate when all 12 petals disappear, assuming that the captain's Bankai was incomplete due to his young age. During his fight with Luppy, these petals were noticeably absent. However, during his fight in the fake Karakura town, they were present once more. Hollowified Bankai, during the Quincy Blood War, Hitsugaya has his Bankai stolen and later receives a pill from Urahara as a measure to retrieve it from the Wandenrake. Upon returning to him, Daiguren Hyarinmaru changes its appearance due to being temporarily hollowified. A sash of ice resembling Hyarinmaru's tail diagonally crosses Hitsugaya's chest, and he gains a mask of ice covering half his face with a hole for his eye, as well as 2 protrusions on his head resembling horns. According to Hitsugaya, should his Bankai somehow end up trying to attack itself, the ice would instead be deflected somewhere else rather than actually attack the Bankai, as demonstrated when Sangdu attempts to attack him with it. Bankai special ability, much like his Shirkai, Toshiro can freeze objects and areas, though the radius and strength of the freezing is greater. Because the Bankai's freezing ability is much greater, Toshiro can swing his tail around as a weapon to try and freeze objects. Hyarinmaru's Bankai lets Toshiro access several additional techniques. Bankai regeneration. During his battle with Luppy Antenor, Hitsugaya's Bankai was damaged. However, it regenerated, and Hitsugaya stated that as long as there is water in the air, his Bankai can be revived indefinitely. Zanhyo Ninjio, lingering ice puppet/doll. Upon activating his Bankai, Toshiro is able to create and shape a large amount of ice into his exact likeness. It is very lifelike, as it can appear to bleed. He stated that he can usually only trick an opponent once with it, so he usually saves it for towards the end of a battle. Shield of Ice Wings. Hitsugaya is capable of wrapping his wings around himself like a sphere, protecting him from attacks. Ryusenka, Dragon Hail Cross. When Hitsugaya stabs his opponents, a huge forward burst of ice erupts from the point of contact between Hyarinmaru and the opponents, encasing and freezing them. Hitsugaya then proceeds to shatter the ice, and his opponent with it. Senin Hyero, 1000 Years Ice Prison. Hitsugaya creates many ice pillars, which encircle him and his enemy. At his command, when he turns his sword 90 degrees counterclockwise, these pillars then move towards the enemy, enveloping and crushing them. Though this technique is very powerful, Hitsugaya infers that it takes a considerable amount of time to prepare, and therefore the distraction of his enemy is crucial in successfully completing this attack. Hayaten Hayakaso, Frozen Heaven 100 Flower Funeral. This ability is an extension of Hyarinmaru's Tenso Jurin power. However, because Hitsugaya dislikes using Tenso Jurin while his Bankai is active, he rarely uses it. The ability opens up a huge hole in the clouds, through which a large amount of snow floats down onto his opponent. As the snow comes into contact with the opponent, ice flowers sprout all over their body, instantly trapping them in a pillar of ice. Hitsugaya claimed that when the last of the 100 petals falls, the life of the one who touched it will be over. Guncho Tsurara, Icicle Flock. Hitsugaya freezes water into ice and then swings his Zanpakuto in an arc, firing an array of ice daggers at his target. Hyoryu Senbi, Ice Dragon Swirling Tail. With this technique, Hitsugaya swings his sword in a linear direction and creates overflowing ice from his blade in the form of a crescent. Zeku, Void Sever. This ability allows Hitsugaya to control his Hyoryu Senbi technique and send it up into the air. Completed Daiguren Hyarinmaru. Following the final battle against Aizen, Hitsugaya trained and strengthened his Bankai considerably, completing its development after 18 months of hard work. Sometime later, during his battle against Gerard Valkyrie, Hitsugaya states that Daiguren Hyarinmaru reaches completion when the last petal of his ice flowers falls. He claims that his power was not mature enough to use his Bankai to its fullest, but he managed to age himself to an adult body when it reached completion in order to achieve its full potential. As an adult using his Bankai, Hitsugaya is tall and lanky, and has ice covering his shoulders, forearms, and knees. Flash Freezing. In his matured form, Hitsugaya can flash freeze extremely large objects at a distance with a simple hand gesture. This also extends to objects that his sword cuts. Additionally, anything that he freezes will have all of its functions and abilities negated. If anyone touches Hitsugaya while he is in this form, they will be flash frozen as well. Shurkai Hyoketsu. For World Freeze. In his matured form, Hitsugaya can freeze all matter in front of him after 4 seconds of building up his power. Weakness. Zanpakuto. Extreme Heat. When presented with the level of heat generated by Yamamoto's Bankai, Zanka no Tachi, Hyarinmaru in Shurkai or Bankai begins to melt and is rendered useless.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.